All right, welcome back everyone for part two of our deep dive into modern Indian history. Perfect for those of you targeting GS1 in your UPSC prep.
Glad to be back.
Last time we set the stage, right? But now, things are heating up. World War II erupts, and India's fight for independence is getting even more intense.
It's a pivotal moment, no doubt.
And today, we're focusing on a piece of this story you don't often hear about, the role of the Indian press during World War II.
Fascinating, right?
Absolutely. It's a story of control, resistance, and the power of the written word. You see, with war on the horizon, the British Raj, well, they really clamped down on the press.
Makes sense. They wouldn't want any dissenting voices during such a critical time, would they?
Exactly. They needed to maintain a unified front, so they implemented these Defense of India rules and the Press Emergency Powers Act.
So, like, official censorship. Oh, absolutely. Think pre-censoring material, demanding security deposits from publishers, even shutting down entire publications if they stepped out of line. The Raj was serious about controlling the narrative. They wanted to push pro-war messages, boost morale, and squash any opposition.
Wow, that's pretty heavy-handed, isn't it? But I'm guessing the nationalist press didn't just sit quietly and take it.
Oh, not at all. They pushed back, even with all these restrictions. They used their platforms to criticize the British war policies, highlighting the economic hardships Indians were facing because of the war effort.
So they were giving a voice to the struggles of the Indian people.
Precisely. But it was a two-sided battle. You have to remember, the British had their own media machine working overtime. Publications pushing pro-war propaganda, justifying their actions. It was a battle for the hearts and minds of the Indian people.
A war of words. That's intense. Okay, so you've got the British trying to control the narrative and the nationalist press pushing back. But you mentioned earlier that some newspapers actually went underground. Like, how does that even work?
It's fascinating, right? They created this whole parallel media ecosystem operating in secrecy, printing and distributing publications clandestinely. They had to be incredibly careful to avoid getting caught.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sounds risky. So how did they get these underground publications out to people?
It was a complex network. Think secret meetings, coded messages, and a lot of reliance on word of mouth. People were hungry for information for a perspective different from the official one.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about the vernacular press either, right? The newspapers published in regional languages.
Oh, absolutely. The vernacular press was critical. They had to reach far beyond the English-speaking elite, tapping into the power of language and connecting with people on a deeper level.
So they were mobilizing public opinion on a much larger scale.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly complex media landscape, right?
Yeah.
Publications supporting both sides, underground papers fighting censorship, and the vernacular press reaching a huge audience.
It was a volatile situation, no doubt. And then another major player enters the scene, Subhas Chandra Bose and his Indian National Army.
Ah, Bose, a real game changer. How did the Indian press react to him and his call for complete independence?
Well, his formation of the INA, an armed force challenging British rule, sent shockwaves through India. He advocated for complete independence by any means necessary. The nationalist press embraced him, published his speeches, spread his ideologies.
So the press essentially became his megaphone, amplifying his message to the masses.
Exactly. And it had a powerful impact on fueling anti-colonial sentiment and challenging British control even further. Bose was a powerful symbol of resistance, and the press, they helped make sure his message was heard.
It really was a turning point, wasn't it?
Ugh!
But amidst all this, there's another piece of this puzzle that we need to talk about. The underground Congress radio. Now, that's something you don't hear about every day.
No, you don't. It's a remarkable story of resilience and innovation, a secret network of broadcasters risking everything to counter British propaganda and keep the nation informed.
A secret radio station. That's incredible. How did they even manage to pull that off with the British, trying to control everything?
It was a constant game of cat and mouse. They had to be incredibly careful, constantly moving their equipment, broadcasting from different locations to avoid detection.
That makes sense. But why radio? Why not just stick with newspapers?
Well, radio had the power to reach a much larger audience, especially those who couldn't read or didn't have access to newspapers. It was a way to bypass censorship and get the message directly into people's homes.
A direct line to the people.
Right.
So who were the key figures behind this clandestine operation?
One name that stands out is Usha Mehta. She was instrumental in running the Congress radio, broadcasting news bulletins, speeches from prominent leaders like Gandhi and Nehru. Think about the courage it took to do that. to risk imprisonment, or even worse, just to get the truth out there.
It's inspiring, isn't it, to think of these individuals putting everything on the line for their beliefs. So we've got this incredibly complex and dynamic period. The British trying to control the narrative, the nationalist press pushing back, the underground press operating in secrecy, the vernacular press reaching the masses, Bose and the INA fighting from the outside, and the Congress radio broadcasting messages of resistance. Wow, what a time to be alive.
It was a crucible, a melting pot of ideas, ideologies, and actions. And then the war finally ends.
Right. World War II comes to a close, and its aftermath.
Well, it's going to have a huge impact on India, isn't it? I mean, the war had really exposed the weaknesses of the British Empire, hadn't it? And fueled a global wave of decolonization.
Absolutely. It was a watershed moment. The war had shifted the balance of power, emboldened independence movements around the world, and in India, it created this sense of urgency, a feeling that change was inevitable.
So did that impact the Indian press, the way they were reporting and covering events? Oh, definitely. The press became this platform for discussing the future of India. What would independence look like? What about the issue of partition? What would India's place be in a post-war world?
So many huge questions looming.
It was a time of intense debate, reflection, anticipation.
The war, in a way, was a catalyst. It accelerated India's journey toward independence and created this incredibly important space for the press. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the British trying to clamp down on the press to the emergence of these incredible underground publications, we've talked about the role of figures like Subhas Chandra Bose and Usha Mehta, and of course the huge impact of World War II itself.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And I think it highlights something incredibly important for our listeners, especially those preparing for the UPSC exams.
What's that?
It's not enough to just memorize dates and events. We need to understand the nuances, the complexities, the different perspectives that shaped this period.
Right. It's about going deeper. Analyzing the strategies used by both the British and the Indian nationalists, understanding the role of various media platforms, and really grasping the impact of these global events on India.
Exactly. It's about developing those critical thinking skills, being able to analyze sources, and understanding the historical context. And the story of the Indian press during World War II is a perfect example of this.
Couldn't agree more. It's a story about the power of information, the importance of different perspectives, and the courage it takes to fight for what you believe in.
And it makes you think, doesn't it, about how these issues are still so relevant today. I mean, information control, media bias, it's something we're still grappling with in the digital age.
Absolutely. The fight for a free and independent press, for access to unbiased information and diverse viewpoints, that's an ongoing battle, even today.
And it's a battle we all have a part to play in, don't we? By questioning what we read, seeking out different perspectives, really engaging with the information we consume.
Exactly. It's about being an informed and engaged citizen. Just like those who came before us, we have that responsibility.
It's like history is echoing, isn't it? But on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into this chapter of modern Indian history.
A fascinating chapter, for sure.
It really is. And for all you UPSC aspirants out there, this period is crucial, not just for understanding the events themselves, but also the forces that shape them.
Exactly. The underlying currents, the power dynamics, the influence of global events.
And the role of the press, of course.
Yeah.
Which is what we focused on today.
Right. And remember, don't just memorize the facts. Engage with them, question them, analyze them. That's how you turn knowledge into wisdom.
Well said. And to all our listeners, whether you're prepping for exams or simply fascinated by history, we hope you'll keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds engaged.
Because the more we understand the past, the better equipped we are to navigate the present and shape the future.
Yeah, kind of said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration of history. Until then, keep those history books open and those critical thinking skills sharp.